Okay, welcome tonight to Monday Night Forum, the open forum. I'm Raven Bird. Jimmy Collins will be joining me here soon. And we welcome you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion tonight. We'll be discussing something that's been on my mind for the last couple of days, and it goes along with something that Jimmy's been looking at for a while, and what I was listening to him say yesterday on Sunday morning as he was teaching. So, but before we get into that, I want to announce, I was just reminded today, I looked at something, we're not announcing it too much now, and now's the time to start announcing it, I guess, is the summer conference coming up. So that people who listen to these broadcasts will know the summer conference that's here in Leslie, Arkansas, here at the Research Center. It'll be held June the 20th through the 24th. That's the last full week of June. And so that whole week, starting Monday night through noon on Friday, we will be having conferences and several sessions a day and all of that. But we would like to see all of you who could come. We'd like to see you here. If you need any lodging, this is a very small town, and the surrounding towns are small, so the lodging is limited, but we can help you, kind of hammer down lodging and things like that. Some driving may be necessary if you go somewhere like Clinton or like that. That's about, 19 miles, I guess, away.
Right in there.
But we'd love to see you here. Again, you don't have to come the full week. People come different parts of the week that they can come, so we would love to see you at any point during the conference. Just to be able to see you and be with you and fellowship with you would be a real joy. So just keep those dates in mind, the 20th through the 24th of June. That'll be our summer conference here at the Bible Research Center. All right. The theme, I guess, we're going to talk about a little tonight, and who knows, it may go somewhere other than this, but I want to talk about sanctification. Sanctification is much like predestination and a lot of other things that through the centuries have been debated, misunderstood, misapplied. And just like predestination, it always has to do with the fact that man needs some type of evidence, outward proof, to justify himself or to prove to himself that he has arrived at a certain level of spirituality. I was thinking driving up here today that type of mentality is the reason we have a lot of futuristic theological ideas. And it's because it's not really that we want to prove it to the world that all this is true. I think Christians need it to be proved to themselves. It's almost like they need God to prove to them.
Sort of a security.
Yeah, that what they've believed all of their lives is actually true. So it's much that way with sanctification, except sanctification, we can involve ourselves in the achievement of it, seemingly. So, religion gives you the principles to apply so that you can be sanctified. Now, that is the ones who believe that sanctification is a process, daily process. There are others, the denomination I was raised in when I was a child, believed that sanctification was a one-time act of God, where you are immediately sanctified. And there are true elements to both of those views. But the part that is involved with both of those views that make both of those views false and vain is that both of them have man as its center and as its reference point. How do you know you're sanctified? Because you don't do these things, or you start doing these things. You don't say these words anymore, all of those things. And I just want you to, I'm not going to qualify all this stuff. It's that, well, I don't mean this. I want you to hear what I'm saying and what we're going to say. I want to deal with sanctification as it truly is and what it truly is for us who are in Christ. We should say who sanctification truly is. There are many places, and we can start. Let me just read a couple of verses here, and this is in Hebrews 10. And we know the whole context of Hebrews 10 and the whole context of the letter of Hebrews. But it speaks of Jesus saying in the volume of the book, I am come in the volume of the book to do thy will, O God. In the volume of the book is written of me, to do thy will, O God. He takes away the first and establishes the second. This is Hebrews 10:10. By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. In verse 14 of that same chapter, for by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. Now the word perfected there means to be brought to the goal. To be brought to the thing that was aimed for. Again, in the context of the Hebrews letter, that is being brought from the first order of things to the second, from the shadows and the testimony and the externalities of the law to the substance that Christ is. But they frame sanctification as not a process to be done or achieved by man, but a once and for all settled fact, done, reality, absolute. You can't take away from it, can't add to it. It is so. And that is true because Paul even goes into the fact that Christ is made unto us sanctification. The person of Christ in us is sanctification. That's a once and for all thing. That is reality whether we know it or not, whether we agree with it, whether we coalesce to it, whatever. It is a reality. Sanctification is a reality. It's a true, full, and fulfilled state of being that we as believers are now in, or that we enjoy, because of union with Christ, because of Christ living in us. And we're going to talk about it. Let me just make these statements before we get into it. But then, it's not a process of making it so or further perfecting what is perfect. It is a soul coming to the acknowledgement. Remember, the Spirit of truth works upon the basis of truth. He works upon the basis of something that's already reality. He will not work upon something unfulfilled. He works upon the basis of what is fulfilled. When we come into Christ, the sanctification that we receive is a fulfilled, perfect sanctification. Everything of God that we have, because of the presence of Christ in the soul, is fulfilled and perfect. And the whole work of the Spirit is always upon that basis. It's always upon the basis of something done, something real. And it's no different here. So there is and I know these two words upset some people when we say them, but there is the objective side, the objective, and the subjective. It is what is so, and then what comes to be recognized, realized, and acknowledged inwardly that is so. It is my soul being secured in reality by union with the person who is my soul's security. And then it is my soul realizing that security in the seeing of Him. And living governed by that security. Living with a true anchor for the soul. In truth, in light, in understanding. Now we'll get into more of that as we go. But I want you to understand, sanctification is not an achievement that we achieve. And we don't find the evidence of sanctification in the natural. Sanctification has no true evidence in the realm of sight and sound, in the realm of natural senses. Now, I know that goes against the grain of what most people teach, but you will never see the true evidence and proof of sanctification with your natural eyes or your natural senses. You see the proof of your sanctification when your soul beholds the face of Jesus Christ. There's where you see evidence. There's where sanctification is proven and perfectly realized. Why? Because, to just say it in a statement and then as we discuss it may become a little more apparent. Sanctification in a statement is defined as, not I, but Christ liveth in me. Sanctification in reality and sanctification in realization is not I, but Christ liveth in me. One remains, one lives. There is one righteousness. There is one perfection. There is one, and it's Him and not me. That's a soul not only that has been sanctified, but that is coming to know and experience that sanctification. I don't know if I said that confusingly or not. But Jimmy was talking about the other day, he was saying, or yesterday actually, but he's been on this a while, with Abram being called out of Ur of the Chaldees and then stopping in Haran. But the whole goal was to a land I will show you. And I want you to kind of take that, or whatever you want to do, but I just saw how that really plays into the whole thing of sanctification, of what God sees as so, and what He comes to realize finally in the appearing of the Lord and in the seeing of the seed being Isaac. But go ahead on that.
Just I guess with this discussion, it's mainly sanctification, but with that,
just whatever you want.
Well, yeah, but with the example with Abram, just with that whole picture right there, you can actually take any term of the Scriptures, and ultimately, every single term of the Scriptures in our hearts, they must come to be found in the person of Christ. And like, just going back with Abram, the God of glory appeared unto him, when he was in Ur. And that, right there's an immediate change, whether Abram realizes it or not. At that moment, he has literally been brought out and unto. That's reality right there, as God knows reality to be. The exact same testimony is seen, I guess, that I mentioned also with the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. And the Lord declares Himself, you saw what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bear you on eagle's wings. I bore you on eagle's wings unto myself. Right. That is reality as God knows reality to be. That is not reality as what is governing their hearts. Right. What's still governing their hearts is their own illusions, vain imaginations, their concepts. And even like with Abram, God did all this because he even also says later on in Genesis 15, I think, I brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees. And when God does something, it is complete. He doesn't do a half job. He doesn't do it halfway, It is complete, it is finished when he does something. He is a perfect God. The thing done is perfect, perfectly accomplished. All right? So here's Abram, and all it is now is a matter, and I've said it this way, is a matter of his heart being brought in understanding unto where the Spirit of God has brought the soul in reality.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
And he gets as far as Haran. He gets as far as man goes as far as man can go in man's strength and man's ability, and that's Haran. And Haran really is no different than Ur. It's still governed by the same, god of the moon. They worship the moon god. In Ur, they worship the moon god. Their main deity was the moon god. In Haran, it's basically a light that is no light at all. It's not light. But they call it light, but it's not light. So that's what kind of governs their understanding. It's basically ignorance, darkness. And God always steps in, and he always steps in for each and every one of us. And now he speaks to Abram at that point and basically declares purpose all over again, out from, unto. And when Abram finally comes into the land, what God shows to Abraham, or Abram at the time, because it's the exact same word, unto a land I will show thee, and then you find it later on, it says, and the Lord appeared. He showed himself unto Abram. And not only that, but he continues to show himself time and time and time again. And every time the Lord appears unto Abram, Abram discovers the greatness of the Lord who is present. And that's why I was saying you can find that and you can see that with each term of the Scriptures, whether it be sanctification, whether it be peace, whether it be salvation, what life, any term in the Scriptures, they testify of Christ. And of course he is, I think you mentioned it earlier, he is only known when he appears. These terms are truly known only when he appears.
Yeah, because you see, and that's the whole thing. I wrote here, and you said it in other terms, but I wrote here, sanctification. Again, it's a state of being that is so, that is sure, that is perfect. Because it's the same thing as saying we have been translated out of darkness into the kingdom of the dear Son. That's sanctification.
Mm-hmm.
From death unto life. That's sanctification. It's a separation unto, not from
no,
as much as unto.
It is always unto
something. And we'll talk about that, but it's the whole acknowledgement of that takes place by the Spirit in us to bring us to the realization of what is already real. Is it separating the soul in knowledge or truth from that from which we are severed through union with Christ?
Yes.
It's a reality being realized.
Mm.
It's truth being, or reality being known in truth. It's a soul experiencing what is already present, what's already done, what's already perfect. It's not making anything more perfect than it already is. It's not making you more separated from sin than you already are.
Mm-hmm.
And see, that's the whole thing with sanctification in religion. How far away from sin can you be? Well, dead to sin is pretty far away from it.
Yeah.
Dead to sin. That's That's as far away from
That's
as you
pretty
can get.
extreme.
But you don't realize that extremity, that, that separation until you see the one who lives. You see because the whole process of sanctification for the religiously minded, the carnal minded, is making my life as much as sinless as possible. Right? That's the whole process of sanctification for us, what we think. Making our life as sinless as possible. The truth of sanctification, as a state of being, is that your life, the life that you truly have, the life that is in you, has no sin.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There is no sin. The realization of that sanctification, and when that sanctification becomes effectual and begins to govern your heart, is when God reveals Him as salvation without sin, as a life without sin,
Mm-hmm.
as sinless perfection. And you then are severed from everything else in understanding, because everything else is seen to have not even existed really, has had no validity, had no reality based at all. It wasn't based in truth and reality. Mm-hmm. It was based in a carnal mind trying to attempting to achieve some level of spirituality that's not even possible. So, let me a little of my history. I was born in a denomination and raised, and I say born and raised, and I was, in a denomination where sanctification was seen to be evidence how long the women's dresses were, how long their hair was. It never seemed to affect men that much, but it was always about the women, what they could wear and what they couldn't. How much makeup they didn't wear. That was a process of sanctification. But see, that doesn't mean anything, what you wear. It's just like Paul said, holy days. Let no man judge you in meats and drinks, holy days, feasts, festivals. These things are worthless. They are empty, vain. They're shadows. At one time they presented and gave a testimony of something real. The things we call sanctification and the evidence of sanctification, they never had any validity to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So wearing long dresses and wearing no makeup and no jewelry, that is not sanctification. That doesn't prove it any more than me wearing shorts and flip-flops right now say I'm sanctified. I know some people think wearing this shows that you're sanctified because you're not a part of the religious system. So you've gone from one extreme to the other, and to me, it's the same thing as Paul saying, circumcised in the flesh, uncircumcised in the flesh. They're both in the flesh. They're both evidenced outwardly, and they have no bearing upon any spiritual reality at all. But it's because man needs evidence. God's evidence is seen in the face of His Son.
Yes.
Man needs evidence other than the face of His Son, and guess what? The default is my face, your face, my body, what I can prove in my actions or lack thereof. Sanctification is my soul beholding a judgment that's already taken place by seeing the remaining one. By seeing the one who remains, the one who lives. And when you see that, your soul is immediately severed unto that reality, and everything else is gone. It's basically, as Paul said, it's forgetting that which is behind. That's sanctification, that's realization of it.
Yeah. That's
a soul truly participating in it and being affected by it. Not just believing, I'm going to be sanctified. No. Sanctification comes, there's reality. That reality is in me, and my soul is pursuing the knowing of that. And in the pursuing of that understanding, everything else is acknowledged to be nothing.
Just one of the things that I wanted to mention is that as all this is just basically the results of the Lord appearing,
True.
of God the Father revealing His Son in the soul of the born-again believer. Everything else is just an automatic result of.
Yes.
Once again with Abram, the Lord finally brings Abram to Canaan, to purpose. Basically, He makes Himself known. God Himself makes Himself known unto Abram. He appears. And see, but though Abram in reality is where the Lord has already brought him, and though now his heart is beginning to come in understanding from, once again, the understanding of man unto the understanding of God, Abram is still governed to some degree by his ignorance of the one who fills the land. So that's why you find Abram kind of going down into Egypt, stepping outside of purpose, basically kind of, stepping outside of the Lord, And God never told him to go to Egypt. But then, in God's divine providence, the Lord brings him back to purpose. And once again, the Lord appears. And then as Abram continues, he is governed more by the reality of God who fills the land than what he was, his own ignorance before. And that's automatic. That's automatic. He didn't try to do this. All this happened automatically when the Lord appeared. And now you don't find Abram going to Egypt ever again.
Right.
In fact, I think at that point you don't really find Abram ever leaving the land, because at one point him and Lot are having they're herdsmen, or having like a little dispute, because the land the area where they were couldn't support them both, and their livestock. And what's governing the heart of Abram now, and this is after he'd returned from Egypt, after the Lord brought him back from Egypt, what's governing his heart now is basically this: Lot, choose whatever you want, but he's constrained now in the land. If you choose the north, I will go to the south. If you choose the east, I will go to the west. In the land. He's constrained. His heart is constrained. His heart is governed by reality, by the Lord Himself. And now he's so much so that he's governed by it. This is what he's declaring to others. Now, of course, Lot wasn't governed by that. So Lot, what does he choose? He chooses outside of purpose. And that's where Lot goes. He ends up pointing his tent towards Sodom and Gomorrah. But Abram remains in purpose. He will not force others. He just continues to serve purpose. And so as we are continuing on in the appearing of the Lord, as God the Father is continually directing our heart, that it would just turn to behold Christ in the midst, the one who fills heaven and earth, all this other is just automatic. And that's the key word. It's automatic. I did want to just mention this because there's a difference, and you were hitting all over it. There's a difference between inside and outside. And I want to read I want to read this verse right here. This is John chapter 2. This is the first miracle that Jesus did. And every single miracle or thing that Jesus does in the Gospel of John is so significant of reality. I mean, John, by the Spirit of God, penned each single miracle with purpose, each single action of Jesus with purpose. It's all with purpose to the end that we may believe in Christ. All right? So here's John chapter 2, verse 1. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee. I'm not even going to go there. But, I mean, that's just so tremendous. This is like declaring reality, resurrection, death, burial, resurrection. Now reality is going to rule and reign right here. And the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come." His mother said unto the servants, "Whatsoever he saith unto you, do." Just do it. Verse 6, and there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of purifying of the Jews, for purification. For making themselves clean, for purifying, all right? Containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. The reason why I brought that verse up is I just looked at the word sanctified. I think the first mention of it is in Genesis 2:3. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Don't you love that? It's like the very first mention, it's mentioned in completion. Something complete. No more to do. It's complete. And it's sanctified. All right. This is Strong's Hebrew, Chaldee, Greek dictionary. Just for that term sanctified, it says a primitive root, to be, causatively make, pronounce, or observe as clean, ceremonially, or morally. Once again, John chapter 2. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, to wash themselves, to make themselves clean. All right? This is what Jesus does. Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said unto them, draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. And when the ruler of the feast tasted the water that was made wine, his very first miracle. And this is a testimony of new birth. Something completely impossible with man, but a miracle with God. Something that's one substance, chemical makeup changed, and another complete substance, completely different, now present in the vessel. Completely different in the vessel. All right? That's new birth. Where before death governed, condemnation governed, and now life governs. I say that because of the Jesus where Jesus says, take this cup, drink this wine, this is my blood of the new covenant. And so now it's basically life is now present. All right? But with that, it's real specific. These were like the water pots for purifying. What the Jews would use to cleanse themselves. That's what it was. And now, here is a new water pot, if you will, that is cleansed because of what it contains, because of what is present. And here's another verse that I was looking at. Sorry, I may be going a totally different direction, but this totally caught my attention. And this is Jesus in Matthew 23, verse 26. And he's speaking to the Pharisees, all right? Thou blind Pharisees, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. And so there you have, they're washing, they're trying to cleanse, sanctify the outside, do all they can on the outside. But see, that's all that man can do. All man can do is what's on the outside. He cannot touch the inside. God alone can cleanse the inside. And that's what the Lord was trying to bring these Pharisees to there, at that point. It's like, bring them to the place where they can confess, I can't do that.
Right.
Of course. So now you need the Lord. Jesus could very well have said right there, yes, now you need me. No, well, they did not want to find their cleansing. They did not want to find their sanctification in a person.
Right.
They wanted to find it in themselves. So they did what they could only do. The outside, wash this, the outside. And yet the Lord makes it real plain. If the inside is clean, the whole vessel is clean. And that's what he does at the marriage feast. He cleans the inside by the substance that is now present.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly it. We were talking about this earlier. It is the whole work of God when in Nehemiah, where they come out of captivity and they rebuild the city, and they rebuild the temple, and they rebuilt the wall, and all of that. So now the city and all of it's defined again by the wall. Everything's defined, and there's it goes back to thy walls are salvation. Because salvation has boundaries.
Yes.
Salvation has defined boundaries. And this is part of sanctification. I'm not getting away from the thought, and we're not either. The whole thing is the boundaries of it. The boundaries. And we're saying it's not necessarily being separated from something, but being separated or severed unto something. When Paul says, it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb. Now we know, and we've talked about a lot of times, in here anyway, that the mother's womb there is speaking of Old Covenant Judaism, that whole system of religion. And you can verify that by going into chapter 4 of Galatians, and he talks about the two mothers, Hagar and Sarah. But he's separated from his mother's womb, called by his grace. Now that's, the calling by grace was the act of separating from the mother's womb. It's not two separate things. Being called by grace, basically being born again, is the process or the work of being severed from his mother's womb. At that moment of grace, that moment of birth, new birth, he is brought out of one and brought into the other. He's brought out of the one by being translated into the other. Mm-hmm. So that's the objective part. The word severed there, separated, is the word, you can define it as severed. But if you look at it in the Greek, in the dictionary, I think Strong's will say it, Vines will say it, different ones, maybe Thayer's. It means to be brought within defined boundaries. And it's not about what you're separated from. It's about the defined boundaries you're separated unto or within. That's sanctification. And that is the objective work that brings you within the boundaries. And it is the subjective work that causes your soul to know those boundaries. And know the fullness and the perfection that is within those boundaries. Just like you said, the land. He was constrained to that land because he knew in that land all fullness was found. All the fullness that God had promised. Everything, the seed, the promises, all of it, it was in that land and nowhere else. And that's the whole work of sanctification. Now this is the whole work of God with Paul that he describes here. By the grace of God, Paul is brought within the boundaries of the fullness of Christ. Okay? Sanctified, severed unto Christ. He talks about being separated unto the gospel. Mm-hmm. Same thing. Separated unto Christ. Sanctified unto Christ. Now, why? To reveal his Son in me. Mm-hmm. So there's the subjective part of this. He's brought him within the boundaries of that Son. But to do what? To reveal that Son. To show him the fullness of where he is. To show him the perfection of the place he's brought him. To show him the glory that is present within the land that he has been brought to. So that he will not seek to find that outside of that place ever again. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about sanctification. And that is a reality that's not evidenced outwardly. It is not known outwardly. It is something that takes place inwardly. It is truly what you were talking about, the cleansing of the cup inwardly, not just outwardly. This is why he calls the Jews whitewashed sepulchres, saying the outward is beautiful and white, but full of dead men's bones. Why did they whitewash the sepulchres anyway? It was a warning sign to those who were coming into the land for the feasts. So they would not touch the sepulchres and become unclean. He's saying you're like the sepulchres that are just warnings to people, don't touch or you'll be unclean. Sanctification is my soul realizing the cleanliness, the incorruptibility that I have been brought into in the person of Christ. It is comprehending the beauty and the perfections of Him and realizing that within these boundaries of salvation, Christ Himself is, there is nothing missing, nothing lacking, nothing that is yet to come that will add to the beauty and perfection of this place. The need is for my soul to continually be unveiled, continually be opened and awakened to the beauty and perfection that's in this place that I'm in the place where I now live. But going back to Nehemiah, we talk about that. Now, I know you were looking at some of it, but one of the places I was looking at was I think it's in chapter 9, chapter 10, where all of the things are done, and then they find the book of the law. And I think it's Ezra who gets up and begins to read the law to the people. And it says that while he read the law, there were those within the congregation who made known what he was reading. They gave understanding of the law. Now this, there's a lot to this, but this is the soul not just knowing the law, but coming to comprehend the meaning, who is Christ Himself, of the law. It's God revealing Christ here. And in that revealing, when the understanding of the law came, the almost immediate thing that happens, the result of that, as you were saying, was now, see, before that, the walls were complete.
Yeah.
The boundaries were
set.
Were done. They were set. But they did not realize the judgment of those boundaries. They didn't realize what those walls truly meant. Because the walls, although erect, were never truly inwardly erect. So they were not governed by the parameters of that place. So when the law's understanding of the law came, when the meaning of the law was given, the defined boundaries became an inward work, a knowledge.
It was established in their heart.
It was in their heart.
What was already established now became established in their heart.
What those walls were now was realized. Now they knew. And what happened? They separated themselves from the mixed seed. Meaning, they realized in this place, none of that can be. That has no place here. Now, that's not about stopping or quitting or all. It's not about that. See, we put that first. We think that's the reality of it. No, it's about the inward working that brought about such an understanding. And they were, because they could have thrown them out anyway. But still
be ignorant
of what the walls were and how salvation was truly defined and measured. But what I'm saying is that a true understanding of the fullness of your salvation will bring you to this understanding. Only one seed can live here. Only one seed can remain here. Only one life remains here. Only one righteousness remains here. And the mixed seed, as you were saying earlier,
is us.
It's us.
Yeah.
Because it's two seeds is mixed.
Yep.
Seed. So he's saying one seed and one seed only. And that's what has to remain in that land.
And that seed is Christ. And therefore everything that is not Christ cannot be present.
And they couldn't be present to begin with. They had no place there to begin with. It was just when the true government of that place came to be known in their heart and began to govern them that they can count as nothing, count as loss. Same thing Paul says, just in a different picture. Same thing he says, count as nothing, count as loss, cast it away, cast it aside. Same thing. You see it in, I was just looking recently at story with Achan. And when they lost the battle because an accursed thing was now in the camp. Now, that whole city and all was destroyed, but he brought back something of that place, right? Mm-hmm. He brought something back, Achan did, and put it in his tent, buried it in the earth, and it was something he held to as though it was of value.
Value, that's it.
And that it was of value within that land, within that place, within Israel. Mm-hmm. And it was a curse there. It was only of value in the other land that was destroyed. The other land that God had put away. It wasn't of no value here. It was an accursed thing here. It was banned. It was not permitted. So what does God say to Joshua? Sanctify these people. How do you do that? The man who brought the accursed thing in has to be reckoned dead. The man that finds value to that which only had value in the other land that has been destroyed has to be reckoned dead. Now, that doesn't mean I got to die. See, that's not the way it works in the true spiritual reality. What that means is, if I see the one who lives, then that fragment that I think has value, that piece that I think still has validity in this place, and the man that brought it and thought it had validity because he could use it for his own glory and his own profit, has to be reckoned as nothing and having no place here, that only one remains here. You understand? It's the seeing of the one who remains, where I see, I don't know.
Paul, that's right. I've got two different verses in my mind. Paul declares that in Galatians when he said, "I am crucified with Christ, yet it is not I who live, but Christ who liveth in me." And it's always based on seeing the Lord who is our life, the life of the believer. It's always based on that, because the deception is this. The deception is this, where the believer believes, I have a life apart from Christ. Yeah. And see, if I have a life apart from Christ, then I have my own interests, what I consider of value or not, just like Achan, and I can, hey, that seems good. Well, no, the one who says that seems good has been put away. The thing is, I'm just ignorant of who lives. Right. But as you said it, when we behold the one who lives, then it's automatic. He's the only one who lives. Right. It's not me. It's not me. And in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, I love that. John on the Isle of Patmos, he hears the voice. He turns to see the voice. He sees a beautiful description of Christ. And then he says this, I think like towards verse 17, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. Or shall I say, the concept of that which I believe to be my life fell at his feet as dead. Mm-hmm. And then here's the Lord. I am he who liveth. Behold, I was dead. Behold, I'm alive forevermore. It's not John, but Christ. Not I, but Christ.
And it's even more singular if you read it in the literal translation. It is, I'm the living one.
I like that. Very singular.
I'm the living one. And that's the whole thing of sanctification. In objective reality and in the subjective realization. The singularity of him. The singleness of it.
Another thing this was with Phinehas, one of the Levites. This is when the Israelites had joined themselves to Baal of Peor. They joined, mingled. The Israelites were supposed to be a testimony of Christ. That's why the Lord said, look, no mixture, because with my son there's no mixture. Do not join yourself to this other, because with my son he does not do that. Well, don't make covenant. My son doesn't make covenant, But they were a testimony, but they were people as well, So here they go, joining themselves to Baal of Peor. And now it's like, oh my gosh, what a mess. It's obviously no longer a testimony of Christ. It's just one big Frankenstein thing. We think it's got life now, but it really doesn't have life at all. And then what happens is that Phineas, basically they say, who's for the Lord, Right. And I guess it was the Levites that stand up and say, we are, or something like that. And basically the judgment was, go kill your brethren that have joined themselves. And here's Phineas, and he goes with a javelin just spearing, like both of them, the one who had joined himself to another. But the whole thing was that they were governed by reality and making that reality known in the midst of Israel. They were governed by the true judgment and making that judgment known in Israel. And it was like going up to him and saying, look, you're dead. You have no life.
Right.
You have no life that goes off and wanders. You're dead. And making that judgment known.
The killing was not sanctification. Sanctification had already taken place.
Yes.
And
the other was just the result of.
Just result. And that's the whole thing. That's what people seemingly miss.
Yeah.
The outward is the thing.
It's like what I had mentioned earlier with Abram. After the Lord had brought him back from Egypt, he is constrained now. He is, shall we say, more governed by the sanctification of the Lord that is present. And now he is, because he's governed, he is now conveying that to Lot.
That's right.
And see, we think it's the other way around. No, don't go over there. Don't go. Stay here. Don't go over there. No, that was the result of something governing in Abram's heart.
That's right.
Already.
And it has to be that way.
Yes.
Because even to bring it to where most people are, is to say sanctification has to do with disassociation from these things. You disassociate with this type of people. You disassociate with this group or whatever. But see, that cannot be the proof of sanctification.
It's all outward.
It's outward. Plus, you can disassociate with them for a myriad of reasons. A lot of reasons. Now, you may eventually call it sanctification to justify yourself and why you leave.
Self-justification.
But you can leave for any reason. Get angry with them, just don't want to be, you get bored with it, whatever. Doesn't mean that sanctification is actually working in your soul. So that can't be the proof of it. It's not about what you see in the outward. I wrote here, real sanctification. This is sanctification that is being experienced. Not just sanctification as a state of being, but sanctification that the soul is actually experiencing. Sanctification being experienced is not evidenced in the realm of sight and sound. It does, however, sever your soul from seeking in that realm the evidence of spiritual reality.
Now say that again.
Okay. Sanctification is not evidenced in the realm of sight and sound, but it will sever your soul from seeking in that realm the evidence of spiritual reality.
And that's when you're constrained of the Lord.
And although, see, that's really the whole argument with Paul with Galatians, Colossians. These are people who have been translated out of darkness into the kingdom of dear Son. These are people that have been called by the grace of God, and he laments that they've gone to some other gospel that's not a gospel. He's not denying their sanctification.
No.
He is lamenting the fact that they are not knowing the sanctification that they have. You understand? They're not knowing what their sanctification. They're not experiencing it. So they go about to establish some proof of it.
Of their own
sanctification, righteousness, whatever. Because in their own hearts, they are not knowing the sanctification that God's already brought about. You know? And then he begins to tell them, I am beholding, this is in Colossians, I am beholding your order in the Spirit. And that's a beautiful thing. Therefore let no man by vain philosophies and the understanding of man bring you outside of the boundaries of Christ. For in him dwelleth all fullness, and ye are complete in him. See, that's a man who knows, whose soul has been sanctified into the boundaries of Christ, and he is finding all fullness, all sufficiency, all reality within those boundaries. So he can say to people within whose souls those boundaries are not truly defined, do not let men bring you without those boundaries. Mm-hmm. Set your affection there. Set your heart to know what is reality within the boundaries of Christ. And in his appearing, what is reality will be made known, will be manifestly, evidently set forth before your soul. And you will experience it as reality. Not because the appearing of Christ has made it so, but because the appearing of Christ has revealed it as so.
And it's not so much that when God reveals his Son, it is so. No. Mm-hmm. When God reveals his Son, you behold
what is
my sanctification.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. And it all comes down to the Lord himself. And that's why it's so important that God reveal his Son in the soul. Because apart from his Son, we will not find it. We cannot find it. I mean, basically, Jesus said it in his own words. If you're going to know anything of God, you have to know it in me. Just one of the things that he told Philip. You know, Philip's like, Lord, show us the Father and it's sufficient. Just show us the Father. He says, Philip, haven't I been so long a time with you?
That's right.
And you've not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. If we're going to find anything of God, we must find it in the person of Christ. That is anything. Sanctification, the same thing. It has to be found in him. I mean, I was just, while you were saying that, I was looking for this verse. But of him are you in Christ Jesus, who of God is made unto us. He is Christ Jesus' wisdom, righteousness, and sanctification and redemption. And I mean, it goes on, you know, so that according as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. If you're going to glory in sanctification, the Lord is my sanctification. I mean, I can just hear. I don't know if David was the one who wrote the psalm, but he said, "My goodness is nothing apart from you."
That's right.
If there is any goodness here, my God, it's you.
Mm-hmm. And that's when sanctification is wrought in the soul inwardly, as an acknowledgement, as a realization, then that leaves you no ground to boast.
Except in the Lord.
Except to glory in the Lord, who is that reality in you. It leaves no room for man to glory, no man to boast in his own accomplishments, which is what sanctification has been made out to be.
Yeah.
It leaves no room for any of that. It brings your soul to the acknowledgement of one man, one righteousness, one life. It brings your heart to the singleness of things. And reality is finally seen. Reality is finally known. Reality is finally experienced. And in the experiencing of reality, in the seeing of him, you realize nothing else is real. Nothing else is reality. Regardless of what people say, regardless of what religion teaches, that's not real.
Or it's what is the word that I used? False. Mm-hmm. Because you have seen the true, this then is false.
That's how a man who gloried in his obedience to the law can now, having seen Christ, walk in the midst of the elements that he once gloried in. Priesthood, temple, obedience to feast, festivals, holy days, what you eat, all of those things. He can now, in the midst of all of that, because that didn't disappear, say, that's not real. That's not real. Well, I can touch it and I can taste it. It's real. No, that's not real. What is real cannot be observed in that way. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But that is a soul being governed by reality. That's a soul that has been sanctified in truth. Not just objectively, but subjectively. Being governed by reality. Being governed by, and being severed from the seen to the unseen.
Yes.
And now that's real. That's perfect. That's more substantial than this has ever been.
That is walking by faith.
That's faith.
That is faith.
That's real faith. And see, that's the whole thing. Why do we need external evidences, cataclysmic events, all of that? No faith.
Yeah.
No faith. Well, I have faith. No. No. Faith beholds what the natural eye can never behold.
Yes.
Faith doesn't wish for something till it can be seen with the natural eye. Faith is really a faculty of the heart in the seeing of Christ that beholds what your natural eye will never see. And when your soul, see, by reality, by new birth, your soul has been truly sanctified
Yes.
unto that. Unseen, perfect reality. What we're saying is based upon that, the Spirit of God works in you to bring you to the acknowledgement of such, and to bring you to the point where your soul is governed and reality is defined right there within those boundaries, within that perfection, within that reality. And you'll never look for reality anywhere else ever again. So, anything else?
I was just thinking, is just as an example, you can grow up thinking one thing's one thing when it's not.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't know about like this. Our current generation is really health conscious. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people are going to alternatives than sugar, other than sugar. All right, and so much so that people will just call it sugar. You know, like just for example, I mean, this is terrible example, but it's like a person will look at a sweetener like stevia and say, it's a sweetener. Well, generations from now, people will probably just call that sugar, but it's not. Mm-hmm. It's not. And I know it's a terrible example, but I just started thinking about that, you know, because it's as we are children, we carry what we have learned from childhood all the way over to adulthood. And finally, the Lord comes, and I mean, God Himself must declare His Son, reveal His Son, and at that moment, His Son declares, I am. Well, I thought sanctification was I, and the Lord just steps up, I am. Yes, Lord, but I was taught ever since I was a child, Lord, or ever since I was a born-again babe, I was taught that this is what this means. And the Lord, I mean, He doesn't even argue. He doesn't argue with our ignorance. And that's the whole thing, is that man will argue with man's religious concepts and their own ignorance and comparing darkness with darkness. And God doesn't argue. He just reveals His Son.
The end of the argument.
Exactly. And in seeing the true, Jesus also declared at his different points, I am the true vine. Why? Because there was a concept of a vine that governed during the time. But it was a false concept because it was a false vine.
It was that in name only.
Exactly.
Because it had that name because it represented the truth.
Yes. But it was in and of itself, it was not the truth.
That's right. And you could hold to that.
Yes.
And it becomes sin. You fall short, and see, that's what Paul calls sin. That's what Paul calls missing the mark. That's what Paul calls the things that we push off and we think are other things. That's what Paul's calling sin, because it's taking what represented a reality that would come in Christ and holding to that and making that the reality.
Or believing that to be.
Believing it is, or trying to conform it to reality, or apply it to myself to produce reality, whatever. But it's something short of seeing Him.
The true.
The truth.
And that's like, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's like, well, you're just trying to take my sanctification away. No. God just desires to reveal the only sanctification there is.
That's right. It's the whole thing of, and I was thinking about this verse as we've been talking. It's what the writer of Hebrews in chapter 6 talks about. Having left, and this is how it's worded in the, having left the first principles of Messiah, let us be being carried on unto perfection. And that's how it's said. It's in the passive. It's being carried on, because it is. The Spirit brings us. It's like the Spirit-guided discovery of what is already real and perfect. It's discovering, it's the length, the breadth, the depth, the height, walking the land and everything, it's possessing it in understanding. It's apprehending, comprehending what is already apprehended you.
Yes.
But it is that. It is the Spirit of God having left already. Why? Because He's in you. You've left the first teachings of Christ, the first principles, the shadows, the elements of the testimony. Having left that, let us allow the Spirit to bring us on and show us those things in their eternal perfection.
Yes, I like that.
Now, not a perfection yet to be, but a perfection that's already present, because He's in you.
He is.
Otherwise, the tendency that the writer knew there was to take those things that are familiar and just bring them on in and lay them again there and say, yeah, they're valid here too. No. To bring those things in because you're familiar with them is disregarding the reality and the perfection that the Spirit would make known. What He's wanting you to do is see what those things were about, to see the truth that those things represented, to see the eternal thing they testified of. It's not to say, well, they had promises, so do we. No, they had promises, we have Him.
Yes.
Who is the promises fulfilled. See, that's a better covenant, not because we don't have to cut animals' throats anymore, but because that better thing, that covenant promise is now in us. He's in us. I mean, that's what it's about. Sanctification is the soul coming to comprehend Him as everything, as all spiritual fullness.
I like the word used, discovering.
Yeah.
And that is all it is. I mean, just back with Abram, that's all that he did. Once he came to the land, it was a walk of discovering the one who fills the land. That's all it was.
It's discovering what He is, not trying to make something achieve some level. It's about discovering Him. And it's a Spirit-led.
Yes.
Spirit-guided. It's not something you do by your power. It's something done by the power of the Spirit in us. So, I guess we're about out of time, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
All right, well, I think that was a good conversation. Probably spurred some thought, maybe other things. You can contact us at the email that's on the website on the screen. And there's an email provided there on the website. We do this, what we do here, these conversations we're having, the teachings we do, whatever. They're for one reason. They're not to basically to teach you Christ, because only the Spirit of Christ can teach you Christ. We set before you basically the facts. We set before you the things that in words, as far as words can go. But we do it hoping that in those words there would be a desire that comes about. Basically, that those words would be used as a tool in the hands of the Spirit to use those words to bring about a desire in your heart to know Him beyond the words. That He may take you beyond the teaching to a true encounter with the person of the Lord. A true experience, an inward experience with the life that these words can merely paint a picture of. But just as the Queen of Sheba says, our words, no matter how true, the report, the gospel, no matter how true, there's an expectation attached to it. But those true words cannot even convey half of what one moment in the presence, the revealed presence of Him will convey to your soul. As far as our words can go is your brain. But the encounter with Christ will affect your soul forever. And that's what we're after. That's what we're after here, to experience ourselves. We're all in the same boat as far as that goes. We're not at a level and you're at another. We're in Christ and we all need to see Him. So, with that being said, we'll end it tonight. Thanks again for being with us. Remember the announcement at the beginning about the conference, and put those dates down and try to be with us. If you can, call us if you need some extra information or assistance in getting a place to stay or whatever you need. And we'll do what we can. So, till next Monday night. Amen.